I have a big old cold sore right on my mouth right here. It hurts, and I'm not going to let that stop me from talking about this movie. Okay, so Zack Snyder's cut of the Justice League, the director's cut, HBO's Snyder cut, however you want to look at it, this is definitely something unique. I have a lot to talk about in this one. I'm going to try and make it as quick as possible, but this is going to be a longer video because I don't just want to talk about the movie. I also want to explain a lot of where I'm coming from and my backstory of why this actually meant quite a bit to me leading up to it. So let's go ahead and get started here because we have a lot to cover. So my story and the evolution of where the importance of this comes through starts all the way back in 2013. In 2013, Man of Steel was released in the theaters, and before that movie came out, I absolutely hated Superman. I thought he was the cheesiest, most unrealistic, unbelievable, and unrelatable character of all time. I had watched the entire original trilogy. Needless to say, this movie coming out when it did, it came out onto DVD, and I watched it with my family, expecting absolutely nothing as a 13-year-old. And watching this movie, it would be an absolute understatement to say that this movie changed my life. And I know that sounds really cheesy and over-exaggerated to say, but like I said, that's still an understatement. It changed how I saw filming, how I saw filmmaking. That was the movie where I started to decide that I wanted to work in film and to work behind a camera, because up to that point, I just worked in music and art. And this changed my mind. It was such a revolutionary movie. To this day, I've rewatched it dozens of times. And even with the incredibly skeptical eye that I've developed, or the critical eye I've developed for film, I still see such few, if any, flaws with that movie. I absolutely adore it. I consider it the greatest superhero movie of all time. And if we were to just talk about movies in general, I would easily put it in my top 3 to top 5 all-time favorite movies. It's that good. I heated at that high of a level. But here's the funny part, nobody else did. And this seems to be something that people are starting to slowly forget as time goes on. When Man of Steel came out, I remember explicitly all the hate that came from it. There was a lot of hate for that movie for a lot of reasons. As I got older, I looked into it because it just blew my mind how people could dislike the movie. They didn't like how they killed Zod. They don't like how it was too dark, it was too slow or too fast, or I don't really know. And I just couldn't believe my ears. And people were pretty angry at Zack Snyder. Okay, time went on. Years later, around 2016 is when Batman vs. Superman came out, also directed by Zack Snyder, the most hyped movie of all time for me, because after the incredible high that came off of Superman and the incredible action, character development, and turning my least favorite superhero of all time into my all-time favorite, I had a lot of hype building up for Batman versus Superman. It came out and critically acclaimed. The story and the history from there. It got pretty awful reviews. I myself was also fairly disappointed with it. It wasn't nearly, in my opinion, nearly as bad as the critics said. I believe it got around a 26 to 27% in Rotten Tomatoes. There was still value in it. It wasn't as bad as people said. This is where people really rallied against Zack Snyder. Now, I bring this up not to be a negative, not to be a skeptic, or to throw this into the bad light. But it seems like everybody over the last few years, since the Snyder Cut has slowly become a reality, have seemed to forgot that you all hated Zack Snyder. You trashed him for so long. This was the point at which, I don't think it's an overstatement to say that Zack Snyder was becoming the Michael Bay for superheroes, for DC. He was doing to DC what people considered as bad as what Michael Bay did to Transformers, in that sense, if you catch where I'm coming from. Why can't you be like Marvel? Why can't you do better than that? And I remember this so clearly. People were canceling Zack Snyder and nobody seems to remember this. So I bring this up for a reason. Now here's where things get interesting. When Justice League came out in 2017, it was a very interesting reaction from the public. It went from getting entirely smashed and destroyed from the previous critics of what Batman vs. Superman and Man of Steel was to actually getting fairly positive reviews. I think after a lot of research, I found in 2017 that the general consensus of the movie was that it was okay. It was a light in the right direction, a step in the right direction for DC. A lot of people were very relieved that they had installed a little bit of humor, made it a little bit lighter. I just remember so many people saying, I enjoyed it. It was a good movie. It was a good step in the right direction. Not the best movie, but it was good. Okay? So the question is, what did I think about it? Look me in the eyes and read my lips as I tell you that this, to this day, stands as the worst superhero movie of all time. I hated this movie when it came out. I hated it ever since, and I hate it to this day. My problem wasn't a state of mediocrity that the film had, but more in the fact that it ruined every last good thing that existed in the DCEU. Okay? Being Superman, the way it treated him was absolutely disrespectful, was absolutely anticlimactic and untheatrical. It was absolutely bland. His redemption consisted of, let's use this box to give his heart a jump start. He jumps out, becomes bad for the sake of being bad for 20 seconds, throws a couple fists before Lois Lane comes over and saves the day because she loves her and comes back to reality. I've never seen that in anything before. And that's what this did. It disrespected him. And then the final fight with him and Steppenwolf was the worst ever for so many reasons. All right. One of the main ones of them, which I will stand by, that nobody seemed to notice, and it made me almost angrier than anything else. The music. They decided for some stupid reason to get rid of Hans Zimmer and Junkie XL for this and bring in Danny Elfman. Now, I'm no hater of Danny Elfman, but I also am not a fan. I think his music's very generic. And the music that he put into this movie was as forgettable as anything I've ever heard. But to make things worse, he ruined the legacy that Hans Zimmer created in the new theme song of Superman. And in Superman's redemption, you actually hear the original Superman theme song come on, the dun 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 dun. And you're like, I know in concept, in theory, that sounds special. And I was so mad. I still am. I think about it and I get furious. Hans Zimmer created the most legendary soundtrack, and you disrespect that by reaching back to some cheap 80s grab nostalgia vibe for the middle-aged people watching this just to get them excited. It infuriated me. And that was when I knew, when that scene happened, that the movie was gone and ruined. That's aside from the fact that it had virtually no plot. The villain was absolutely awful. The CGI was the worst I've ever seen. The color palette was trash. I hated everything about this movie. But might I remind you that nobody else did? It was so interesting, this dynamic of people having a consensus that it was a redeeming hope, and it wasn't to me. People had tried at this point, people were canceling Zack Snyder. And I have proof of that because after that, I believe it was after that, they came out with Wonder Woman. I know after that, they came out with Aquaman. They came out with Shazam, and people loved those movies. Aquaman came out and everyone said, oh, it's such a fun movie. Finally, something that we can take for joy. Thank heavens Zack Snyder is out. And then Shazam came out. Oh, such a fun comedy. Thank heavens Zack Snyder is out. I'm not imagining this. This is what happened, and people are forgetting. Justice League came out, and I lost hope. That is when I gave up on the DCEU because it ruined everything good left in the DCEU. And that brings us up till now. Now, between then and now, there's quite a bit that happened. The hashtag Snyder Cut came out, and the fans basically willed this movie into existence, which is very impressive. And I'll be honest in saying I was not one of the people who helped will it into existence. I did not hashtag release the Snyder Cut. I didn't care. I didn't believe it was worth seeing. And I was so angry at Justice League that I didn't want to see any more. My heart was broken. My childhood, and that may sound cheesy to say, but my childhood of Man of Steel had been shattered. So I kind of discontinued everything after Man of Steel and pretended like it didn't exist because I still adored Man of Steel so much. I couldn't bear to see it being destroyed and ruined and the disrespect that Justice League was. That brings us to years later, and this movie came out. It came out, I believe, this last Thursday or Friday. It took me a couple of days for me and my wife to get around to saying it because it is a 4-hour movie. It is everything in there that Snyder could possibly want, and it's a full thing. So we finally got this chance to sit down to watch it, and going into this, my expectations were right here at, basically, I expected a different color grading, palette, longer scenes, longer dialogue. That's about it. That was my expectations for this movie. So, I finally saw it, and it's time to talk about what my thoughts were on this. It's fair for me to say that this movie brought back every single ounce of hope that I felt the day I watched Man of Steel. This brought back every sense of confidence that I had in DC when I watched that way back 8 years ago in 2013. This movie was such an absolute black and white difference between the original. I don't know how they derived, Warner Brothers, how Joss Whedon derived the mess and absolute abhorrence of a movie that was the 2017 Justice League from this masterpiece. Now, I'm not going to sit here and say the whole movie was perfect, but I want to start by saying, Zack Snyder, you've done it. You've done everything that you hope to do, and I'm proud of you. I know that's a weird thing to say for a guy who's literally way younger than you, not nearly as talented, and, on that note, you don't even know, but I am proud of you. This has brought you back to power, and I'm so happy to be sitting here saying that. I was not going to make a review of this movie. I genuinely was not going to, because I didn't expect much out of it. And there's a lot of things that I was just prepared to just watch and be like, all right, well, it is what it is. Maybe a few things are updated, a couple cooler shots. And I have everything to say about this movie. So let's hop into it. We're going to try and cut through this as fast as we can because I have a lot to cover in this sense too. First off, the CGI in this movie was so much better. I don't know how. It makes no sense in my mind. I genuinely expected the CGI to be worse than this because it's a TV cut. Like, how did the CGI in a 4-hour director's cut that was completely revamped turn out better than the theatrical release that the whole world saw in 2017? I've talked about how bad the CGI was in the original one. I still stand by it. Not just that, but the color palette, the red and orange, is absolutely awful and miserable to watch during that movie. And this movie changes all of that. Everything that I had to complain about the original was changed here. Just about. Steppenwolf, my goodness, what a change of pace. Who could have known that you could have taken the weakest, most one-dimensional, pathetic character in the world and turn him into an actually threatening villain that you kind of care for? Wow, they did that, and it's so shocking to see. Steppenwolf was so impressive. We're going to get to him a little bit more in a second because he's got his own thing to talk about. The background colors of the movie, the whole color palette, this is something we all knew is coming. The whole color palette went from very orange to very blue. I love it. That's what I live for. And, that does help me kind of dive into the characters more. Steppenwolf was further developed. He was beautifully developed. Not only did he look way better, you actually understand his motive in this one. From there all the way to the fact when you figure out what his drives are, you start to feel for him when you realize this guy literally just wants to get back to his family. Just wants to get back to the fold and to prove himself. Jumping into the other characters, Cyborg. I mean, you've heard so much about that if you've been online looking at the different reviews for this, but Cyborg was the heart and soul of this movie. I would argue not the only heart and soul of this movie, but man, was he just a vital pumping vein in this one. I mean, they turned such an absolute glum, boring character into something absolutely enthralling to watch. Now, he wasn't my favorite character in the movie, but man, was he so much more likable than in the original. Everything that I hated about him in the original, they had fixed about him. Mainly that he was forgettable, had no purpose. I can't overstate. I mean, the fact that he was the one who had to destroy the mother boxes. It just makes you wonder what made Joss Whedon decide to change that. Like, why would you change the heart and soul of the movie? And it's even more important for Cyborg and Flash, who I'll talk about in a second, to get more development because they never had their own movies and they haven't yet. The Flash was easily my favorite new development out of the whole thing. There's a lot of people talking about Cyborg and they did a great job with him. I don't hear as many people talking about Flash because they turned him from the annoying, quippy, try to be Peter Parker character in the movie to somebody very sincere. Like, you root for this kid. And, there's the whole scene at the beginning where he saves the girl in slow motion. He saves the girl from the crashing car, which is a really sweet scene. I think it was a great scene, But this is all fluff compared to where he shines in the last act. You know what I'm talking about if you've seen the movie. I'm going to address that in a minute when we talk about the end of this. But suffice it to say, they have done the Flash justice. No pun intended. Wow, they did so wonderfully with him. And that was just such a relief to see. Even Batman was better in this movie. I'm not going to spend much time talking about him because it was basically the same. I've never liked Ben Affleck as Batman, but he was actually tolerable here. I didn't hate him. Nextly, that brings me to one of the greatest reliefs that this movie had to provide in the music. The music was so much better. It wasn't until I started watching the movie with my wife that I decided to pull up some of the credits of the movie to see what changes were made, and I realized that they had brought back Junkie XL and replaced it with Danny Elfman's music, and I couldn't have been more excited. I was freaking out. I was like showing my wife, and she's like, "Oh, okay, fine." And I was so excited, and I was praying that implied certain things about the Superman theme song, traveling back to when I watched it in 2017. And I was praying that it insinuated some of the crucial changes. Music is so important to me. I'm very picky, and I was really hoping that would be the case, and I was not disappointed. And this will feed into my thoughts on how they treated Superman, which is the next thing I'm going to talk about. But suffice it to say, yes, they respected and they treated with passion the original legacy of Hans Zimmer's new theme song for Superman, for Man of Steel. That's what they used. Forget the crappy cut or the decision that they made to use the original Superman theme song in his redemption scene in Justice League. Gone and away with that. They used the Man of Steel theme song, which is by far the best theme song ever. Period. No argument. I can't keep myself from it. Let's just talk about Superman's redemption, because that was easily the greatest redemption of this movie. I was watching 2.5 hours of this movie thinking, this is good, this is decent, but it all comes down to how they treat Superman. And my boy Zack Snyder did everything right. This reconfirms and redeems everything that Zack Snyder has ever been as a director. I love what he did here. He just brought everything back to where it needed to be. Superman came back. You know why this time. You understand what the purpose of the Mother Box and the power of the Mother Box is. You understand how they're bringing it back to life. It all makes sense. It's even an aha moment when you figure out how they're going to bring it back to life, which is crazy considering I've already seen the movie that they gave me an aha moment. They bring him back, and it's the way they do that, even leading up to them redeeming him. It's just so compelling that when they decide to bring him back, they realize the consequences that could be involved with that. And he comes back bad. And somehow here, it's an actual punch in the face. You actually care. You care. Oh, and here's something. They don't just throw a couple slaps around for 5 seconds before Lois runs up, gives them a hug, and they fly away together. They actually have a beatdown. They fight for what felt like 5 to 10 minutes. He has a one-off with Wonder Woman, who he just obliterates, with Aquaman, with Flash, with Batman, who he just humiliates. I'm spitting a lot. I'm sorry. So he flies off with Lois, and the way they treat it was just so good because they took their time having him come back to himself. Oh, and gone are these scenes with the absolute worst CGI mustache removing effects I've ever seen, and we all know about that. But my goodness, to go back and realize that Joss Whedon literally reshot those scenes just so he could get a couple terrible one-liners in from Superman and Lois stuns me. I thought maybe he was trying to create that new scene in the field to create character development, but no, there was already scenes that Zack Snyder filmed. Joss Whedon just wanted other lines said and called them back for that. Why? Why would you do that? Then, where it all builds up to, where it all comes around to, this is where I knew that this movie was everything it needed to be, was finally when Superman goes, he gets suited up in his new sweet black attire, and he flies up to the sun before going down to help battle. And you hear the Superman Man of Steel theme song from Hans Zimmer. You see him up there, he's basking in the light of the sun, and I just get chills all over. And I haven't felt like that watching a movie since 2013, when my mind was blown and my life was changed by Man of Steel. It brought back those same vibes. Does the smile on my face give you a hint of how excited this makes me? It was perfect. Superman has been redeemed. Suffice it to say, they'd done their job. Zack Snyder did what he had to. He truly loves and respects that character, and Henry Cavill as the definitive ultimate Superman. Now, this is going to bring me back to one of my last points to talk about as far as the pros of this movie are concerned, the last battle, which is its own separate topic, but to keep it short, man, what a world of difference. This is where the biggest difference of the movie, in my opinion, shines. Literally, I can only think of, on less than a few fingers, the similarities. I've never seen such a difference. It's not just from orange to blue tones. It's not just change of skies. The whole setting's different. You understand why it's an evacuated town. They get rid of that Russian family that's there that they're trying to save. That made no freaking sense. And they have this one-off with Steppenwolf, this villain who has real motives. And man, this last fight was so good. It was so beautiful. Oh my goodness. I mean, Everything that everyone did to pitch in was fantastic. It was exhilarating. It had me on the edge of my seat. The music and everything that came together. But there are a few highlights that we need to talk about, and that's what we're here for. Number one, Cyborg did a great part. He shined. That's a no-brainer. But he wasn't the highlight for me. Superman shows up just in time to stop Steppenwolf and his huge freaking axe from chopping Cyborg halfway to heck. He swings the axe, and that's when Superman shows up. It slams on his shoulder. Superman looks up, blows on the, ice breaths the thing, and just pops it. And it just shatters. And at the moment, I'm like, can you tell I'm excited about this movie? And then Superman just power kicks Steppenwolf to the next frickin' dimension. Not really, he just kicks him into the wall. But man, the best freaking kick ever. I mean, if that crap was playing in theaters, the whole freaking theater would have been roaring. You would have heard screeching on both sides of the ears as people just scream and roar. I would have been one of them. Such a good moment. I mean, I don't even remember what the old Superman did. Probably showed up and played patty cake with Steppenwolf for a couple of seconds. I don't remember, but I just know that this was unrivaled. And then the moment that I've been leading up to as well. I left this off before talking about Flash. We're going to talk about it now. This last scene redeemed Flash as one of the greatest Justice League figures in this movie. From one of the most irrelevant to literally the superhero that saved the world. Steppenwolf basically wins. Everything explodes, and everyone dies in an instant. And at that exact instant, the Flash steps in and sees everything in slow-mo as it's happening, and just runs so fast that he reverses time just a few seconds and changes everything. Oh my gosh. What a cinematic moment. What a legendary moment. Oh, it was so well done too. It wasn't just the idea that was cool. The way they did it, the music they played. This is what we needed. This is what we wanted all along. I can't express enough how much of a different movie this is. So blood-pumpingly, vitally different. There was almost nothing to be related to between the two climactic endings between 2017 and the Snyder Cut, including how Steppenwolf dies, which is way more savage in this one. They slap him around a bit, punch him into the next dimension after Flash has rewounded time by a few seconds, and Wonder Woman just grabs her sword and legit chops his head off as he flies into his own homeworld dimension through a portal. Excuse me? Yeah, that Wonder Woman chopped his head off. What are you going to do? Throw this guy in jail? This is my complaint. See, the same people that thought that was the coolest scene ever are the same people, I swear, in 2013 complaining and whining that Superman had to kill Zod. What are you going to do with him? You got to throw him in jail? You can't stop it. You have to kill some people. You have to kill these villains. Now, that does bring me on the note of the violence. This is more violent. It's a director's cut of sort, so it is more brutal. Now, we're not talking Logan and Deadpool levels of gore and excess. I personally can't stand that. I cannot stand over exaggeration of violence. It just pulls me out of a movie and I dislike it, and this movie wasn't like that. But it was more brutal. I mean, Steppenwolf straight up chops Amazonians in half. He throws a few heads off. Like, he's a brute. I mean, he's a force to be reckoned with, and you feel that. There's more blood. I mean, there's a scene where Steppenwolf just freaking power kicks like a soldier or somebody into a wall 20 yards away, and when he hits the wall, there's blood stains on the wall. And you're like, yeah, that's probably what would happen if you just got karate kicked by a freaking god figure. So it is more brutal. I wouldn't recommend it for younger audiences, but with that being said, on every other aspect, it stays pretty relatively clean. It doesn't take advantage of being a TV cut, of just throwing in all the trash it wants to. It stays very moderate. It's just more brutal in its violence, and it has more impact in the fight scenes because of that. Now, with all that being said, there are things that could have and probably should have been adjusted to improve the movie. Not a ton of things, but my main notes, the first half of the movie had way too much slow motion. Like, just a laughable amount of slow-mo. Like every other shot, like Wonder Woman jumping in slow-mo, and then swing, and then slow-mo, and then swing, and then slow, and you're just like, after watching that for 10 minutes, you really get bored. It was slow-mo shots that I genuinely wondered why they were slow-mo, and I'm like, that wasn't even epic, you're just watching somebody walk away. The good news is that didn't happen in the last half of the movie too much. I think there was some of it that I'm like, but it stopped it for the most part. Additionally, Wonder Woman has this new theme song apparently in this movie instead of that typical like kind of rock theme song. Yeah, instead of that one, they replaced it with a lady just howling. Just this, oh, like, I'm not kidding. Like, that's kind of what it sounds like. I'm not kidding you when I say they played this every time Wonder Woman showed up on the screen. Now, for a 4-hour movie, you start to get tired. I did, at least, when it happened for the 12th or 13th time. I'm not kidding. It would happen. Like, you'd hear the singing later, oh, and then it would cut to Batman doing something cool, and then it would come back to her 20 seconds later, and oh, and you're like, why is this lady so excited? It was so phenomenal to look back and wonder how they ever created a 2-hour version of that movie. And I think that's where my anger for Joss Whedon and Warner Brothers in the original cut of this movie comes out. Because even though they finally have this out, and I'm grateful for them for that stain will always be in my head. My question is, why do you have to make it so bad? It's not just a matter of rearranging the cut in a restricting way, but why did the original Justice League have to be 2 hours long? It's a Justice League movie. That movie could have been 3 hours and people wouldn't have complained. Avengers was in 2 movies. It was almost a 3-hour movie. They could have made that 3-hour movie, and with 45 minutes more of content, they could have easily put back things like Darkseid, like the Flash's side plot with being able to save the world, with the development on Superman. They could have honestly put most of the good Zack Snyder material in there if they had just expanded it more. I don't understand why they did it. I'm not going to dwell on it. All I'm going to say is that they've done it. They've redeemed Justice League, and I can confidently join the leagues and leagues of people standing here now saying that I want the Zack Snyder DCEU universe restored and to come back. For all of you people who were there from the beginning and originally said, oh, I hate Man of Steel and I hate Batman vs. Superman, and oh, I like Justice League, and then, oh, Justice for Zack, get out of here. You're fake. I don't want you here. I just slapped a light. At the end of the day, would I recommend this movie? Freaking yes. Go watch it. Sit down, map out 4 hours. Don't break it up into 2 different sessions. Watch it in one sitting. Grab a big freaking bowl of popcorn. Sit down. Watch this with somebody that you care about. You're going to have such a great time. This movie is fantastic. I absolutely loved it from beginning to end. If I had any suggestions or advice, though, I would love to see this movie cut into a theatrical runtime. Which sounds like a weird critique after asking for a Snyder Cut for so long from people. But the thing is, the problem that this movie couldn't be seen to have is that it doesn't have a lot of rewatch value because it's hard to go back and rewatch a 4-hour movie. I'd love to see them cut this down, the Snyder Cut down, to a 2.5 to 2 hour and 45-minute movie. I'd love to see that. That way I can go back and watch this more frequently. That way I can watch it with family members and I can see it at parties. But at this pace, it's kind of hard to, just because of the nature of it being a 4-hour movie. Not a lot of people are up for that, and that's what I have to say about that. At the end of the day, sitting down to rate this movie between 1 and 10 is a little difficult just because it's got such complicated origins and the nature of it being a 4-hour movie gives it a lot more work to be dealt with. But I have no hesitancy in giving this a solid 9 out of 10. You know, the things that I just mentioned can be a little annoying. Probably kept it from a full 10, but that's nothing to even be mentioned compared to the pure redemption that is this movie. And simply the redeeming factors of how it took it from such a bad, the worst movie of all time in my eyes, to one of the greatest superhero movies right there. You know what? I'm just going to say it. This is a 10 out of 10. And I'm so happy to be sitting here and saying that because I genuinely did not expect to. That is it for today, though, guys. Thank you for sticking with me for so long. I know this is a longer video. I just had to let this off my chest. Thank you for sticking with me for it. Let me know what you thought of the cut. And don't worry, you don't have to love it. If you didn't like it, let me know what you thought in the comments and why you didn't like it. If you're a normal person, though, and you did like it, go ahead and tell me what you thought about it and why you liked it in the comments. As always, please make sure to give this video a like. Subscribe to my channel if you haven't, because I'm coming out with reviews like this daily, and I'll continue to do so. But I love you guys so much, and I'll see you on the next one. Later, guys.